Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday YouTube channel. I am your host, Ryan Hartley. This channel is for heart-centered leaders just like you. I hope our time spent together helps you leave a heartprint where those around you are left better than yesterday. These interview sessions are sponsored by our great friends at Elevate Online Marketing. For the month of October, I will be turning back the clocks and sharing some of my favourite episodes from the last 4 years that inspire a message of faith, hope, and love. On episode 195, we revisit episode 112 with Dr. Gary Chapman. Today is all about love, and what better episode to pick out the archives than this with Dr. Gary Chapman, the author of the best-selling The 5 Love Languages series, which has sold more than 20 million copies worldwide and translated into 50 languages. Dr. Chapman travels the world presenting seminars on marriage, family and relationship. His radio programs air on more than 400 stations. The 5 Love Languages has been a powerful tool in my own journey, my own marriage and relationships, as well as those that I've been able to support through Always Better Than Yesterday. I highly recommend finding your love language. If you haven't yet, head to 5lovelanguages.com/quizzes. You can find the link within the show notes. Go ahead, go and discover your love language. I promise you the insights will be priceless. And then go and share that with everybody in your life too, so that you can learn how to love people in a way that leaves people feeling loved. Yes, that's going to be one of the great insights that you're going to hear from Dr. Gary in a very short moment. I hope this episode inspires you. I hope it captures your heart and your imagination. And I hope and encourage you to share this with one person whose love you wish to inspire too. Here we go. Let's revisit episode 112 with Dr. Gary Chapman. Dr. Gary Chapman, it is such an honor and a privilege to have you on the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you?
Well, Ryan, I'm doing well, and I hope you are. It's been a difficult year last year in many ways, but I'm alive and feeling well. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And it's not every day you get to spend company with someone that's wrote a book that's been read by 14 million people, almost 14 million people. I'd just love to know about your book, The 5 Love Languages, and just some of the origins, really. Take us back to working through this concept of the love languages.
Well, Ryan, I've been counseling couples for over 40 years now. And a number of years ago, I remember the first time it dawned on me that what makes one person feel loved does not make another person feel loved. They were in my office. I had not met them before, the first appointment. And the wife said to me, Dr. Chapman, she said, we don't argue. And she said, we don't have any money problems. She said, but the real problem is I just don't feel loved by my husband. I looked at him and he said, I don't understand that. He said, I get home before she does in the afternoon. I start the evening meal and sometimes I have it ready when she gets home. He said, then I wash dishes. On Thursday night, I vacuum the floors. Saturdays, I wash the car, mow the grass, help her with the laundry. I do all those things, and she tells me she doesn't feel loved. And he said, I don't know what else to do. I looked back at her, and she started crying. And she said, Dr. Chapman, he's right. He's a hardworking man, but we don't ever talk. For 20 years, we haven't talked. So I knew here was a sincere husband who loved his wife and a wife who didn't get it. And after that, I had similar stories over and over in my office. And I knew there had to be a pattern to it, but I didn't know what it was. So eventually I took time to sit down and read several years of notes that I made when I was counseling and asked myself, when someone said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories. And I later called them the 5 love languages. And I started using that concept in my counseling, that if you want her to feel loved, you've got to express love in her love language. If you want him to feel loved, you've got to learn his love language. And I would help people discover their language and challenge them to go home and try it. And sometimes, Ryan, they would come back in 3 weeks and say, Gary, this is changing everything. The whole climate's different now. And then I started using it in small groups of couples, and the same thing would happen. So probably 5 years later, I thought, if I could put this concept in a book, write it in the language of the common person, leave out the psychological jargon, maybe I could help a lot of couples that I would never have time to see in my office. So that's how it happened. And I had no idea, of course, that, as you just said, it would sell 14 million copies and be translated in over 50 languages around the world. Which really surprised me, because my academic background before I studied counseling was anthropology, cultural anthropology. And I was sensitive to cultural differences. So I wasn't sure this would work in other cultures. But apparently these 5 things are rather fundamental to human nature, whatever the cultural differences.
It's interesting you touch on that human nature point. Do you think that's why it's been so popular?
I think what's happened is couples have read it. It's kind of like the lights came on. They realized what had happened and how they were missing each other. And so they discovered each other's language. They started speaking it. The emotional climate changed. They really felt loved by each other. And then they wanted their brother and his wife, their sister and her husband, and they started giving it. It's just gone word of mouth, really, all over the world. So I think it's because it meets that deep emotional need to feel loved. And if you're married, the person you would most like to love you is your spouse. If you feel loved by your spouse, life is beautiful, and you can handle all the other things in life much easier. If you don't feel loved, life begins to look dark, and all the conflicts and problems become bigger in our minds. So I think that's why it's been so popular. It does speak to that deep human need to feel loved.
I also want to thank you for helping validate me in my own marriage, because my wife would often tell me that she loves me, and quite jokingly, there's a little joke where I'd say, "Oh, give me 3 reasons why," and it'll be no secret to you that I found out that my primary love language would be words of affirmation.
Yes. Well, I wish I'd
Which
have known all this in the early days of my marriage, but I didn't know all this. And my wife and I struggled a lot in the early years of our marriage. But it's helped us enhance our own marriage, and obviously many people have said to me, it saved our marriage. I mean, really, we were thinking divorce until we read the book, and it just really changed. It saved our marriage.
Yeah, my wife and I, we speak different languages, and I come from a single parent family background where my mum would do everything. She was very independent. I've therefore become independent, but my wife was very much single child family. Everything was done for her, and her primary love language to feel loved is acts of service. And I really love something you say is that sometimes the greatest show of love is to do what is most uncomfortable, most difficult. Why is that the greatest act of love, greatest show of love?
Well, I think, when your own love language that is the one that's lowest for you, least important to you, is the most important for your spouse. That's when it's difficult, because first of all, it's hard to conceive that would be important to them, because it's not important to you. And consequently, it doesn't come natural for you to speak that love language. So there is a learning curve, and it takes effort to learn, first of all, to keep it on the front burner of the mind, and then secondly, to choose to do that, to speak their language. But here's the good news. You can learn to speak any one of these languages, even if you did not receive them as a child and have no experience in it. You can still learn to speak these languages, because it's a matter of choice. If I know that my wife's love language, well, let me say this. I had a man say to me some time ago, he said, Gary, I read your book, and my wife and I took the quiz, and she tells me that her love language is acts of service. But I'll tell you and her, if it's going to take my washing dishes and vacuuming floors for her to feel loved, she can forget that. I said, well, that's your choice. If you want to live with a wife who has an empty love tank, that's your choice. I said, I much prefer to live with a wife who has a full love tank. I said, I know what it is with both. For many years in our marriage, I lived with my wife with an empty love tank. And then now I live with her with a full love tank. I much prefer the latter woman. I said, so my choice is, that's my wife's love language as well. I said, so man, give me the vacuum cleaner. Turn me loose on the dishes. It's a small price to pay to live with a happy woman.
I love that. That's such a great story. And one of the things I really loved is almost a one-liner from the book, that you imagine a world where children, they go into the world with this sense of curiosity and learning and discovery, not seeking the love that they didn't have as a child. And I think, that has massive implications for when we grow up and we go into the workplace, we become leaders. And I reflect on my own journey. In my early days, I absolutely was one of those kids showing up in the world for love. I call it leading for love, not from love. And what are some of the impacts that you see of people that show up in the world leading for love?
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think what happens is that we seek to use whatever our position is to meet our own need for love. In fact, there are people that read my book and come away with that same mentality. And they say to me, well, we read the book, and, we took the quiz, and my wife's love language, she knows what my love language is, but she won't speak it. So what can I do to get her to speak my love language? So it's self-centered. It's me. Now I've got this new insight now on how you can make me feel loved. And that's where the emphasis is. And I typically say, well, I think you need to turn that around. Why don't you choose to love her in her love language and see what happens? Love stimulates love. So you love her in her love language, even if you don't feel loved. And you start touching her deeply, and she begins to sense your love for her. Your love will stimulate her love toward you. So rather than demanding that your spouse speak your love language, you don't get anywhere with that. But you use the information to communicate love to them, and you're influencing them in the most powerful way. We don't love to get loved. Many people do, however. It's manipulation. I've had people say, Dr. Chapman, I spoke my spouse's love language for 3 weeks and it didn't help. I said, 3 weeks? Why don't you try 3 months? Yeah. And I say, okay, so you're telling me that you're trying to manipulate her to love you, and you tried this manipulation tool for 3 weeks and it didn't work. Well, I never thought of it that way, they say. But yeah, I think that's true. I think, and especially if we didn't feel love growing up, that is a factor in our so much wanting to be loved. And when we hear something like the love languages, we think, oh, here, this is the answer. I'm gonna let people know what makes me feel loved, and then they're gonna love me. And rather than thinking, wait a minute, I want to be an agent of love. If we become an agent of love, then we're going to impact other people in a positive way. And there'll be some of those people that will return that love, and you'll feel loved in the workplace or in extended family as well as in a marriage.
Hey friends, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. I just wanted to let you know on the 24th of October, I will be welcoming 12 men to the Always Better Than Yesterday Good Fathers program. It is 6 weeks of online journeying with 12 good men. I really believe that if I can help good men become even better men, then better men will make better dads. It's been 10 years since I became a father, and it has been the most fulfilling journey, but full of challenges and obstacles that I probably was under-equipped for. I didn't feel prepared for the sacrifice, the tiredness, the impact on our health, let alone what it means to be a good husband and a good teammate as we try and journey in becoming the best dad possible. These children don't come with guides, and it just, for me, I felt like whilst I wanted to be the best dad I could possibly be, I've definitely felt a sense of winging it. And it doesn't seem to be conversations that men seem to have about what it means to be a dad. So I've set up Good Fathers. It's the first program that I'm offering dedicated specifically to men, good men who want to become even better dads. Come and join us. We're starting on the 24th of October. Use the link in the show notes to come and read more about it. But first and foremost, this will be a safe space for men to explore their purpose as a father. It's going to contain a combination of coaching, learning, conversation and reflection. Each week we'll follow a semi-structured topic of conversation. I'll support you with resources and prompts designed to facilitate a powerful, transformative experience. You will not only learn from me, but from each other and shared experiences. I do not have all the answers, but I will hope to create an environment and a space for you and other good men to reflect and to create much more of an intentional style of parenting that will help you leave that legacy by becoming the best possible dad that you can be. If you know a good man that would benefit from this container, this time and space, please do share them the show notes. It's www.abty.co.uk/good-fathers. That's Good Fathers on our website. Here we go, back to the conversation. I saw one of your keynotes recently, and like the opening line, it was something along the lines of, if you're not a loving person, you will not be a servant leader. What did you mean by that?
Well, that grows out of my own marriage, because in the early days of our marriage, we were really struggling. You know, we lost all those euphoric feelings, you know, of falling in love. That was all over. Our differences emerged, and we didn't know how to solve them, because when you're in love, you don't think you're going to have any problems. And we didn't know how to solve them. So we ended up arguing with each other, and I would raise my voice at her, and she'd raise her voice at me, and we would end up saying hateful things. And I remember one day when I finally I said to God, I said, I don't know what else to do. I'm doing all I know to do, and it's not working. I don't know what else to do. And I was in graduate school, in seminary, studying, you know, to be a pastor, a leader. And I just thought, man, I don't know. I mean, there's no way I can get up and share with other people and be this miserable, you know? And I said to God, I don't know what else to do. And as soon as I said that, there came to my mind a visual image of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples. I'm sure you remember that story. And then he stood up and said to them, I'm your leader, and in my kingdom, this is the way you lead. The leader serves. And I just heard God say to me, man, that you don't have the attitude of Christ. You're not serving your wife. And it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I knew it was right. My attitude was something like to her, you know, if you'll listen to me, we'll have a good marriage, you know. She wouldn't listen to me. And so I just said to God, forgive me. With all of my study in Greek and Hebrew and theology, I've missed the whole point. And I said, please give me the attitude of Christ toward my wife. And in retrospect, it's the greatest prayer I ever prayed about my marriage, because my heart changed. And three questions made it practical. And when I started asking these three questions of my wife, things began to change. They're simple questions. Number one is, honey, what could I do to help you? Number two, how can I make your life easier? Number three, how could I be a better husband to you? And my wife was willing to give me answers. And I responded to those and served her. It didn't happen overnight, but within 3 months, my wife started asking me those three questions. And we've been walking this way for a long time now. in which I've been reaching out to her and she's been reaching out to
Yeah.
me. And it's the key. It's the key to it. It really is at the heart of love. Love is an
Mm,
attitude that has, I want to enrich the lives of the people that I relate to. And if
mm,
I'm married, I want to enrich the life of my wife or my husband. If I have children, I want to enrich their lives. And then whomever I encounter throughout life, the attitude of love is I want to do something that'll be helpful to them.
mm.
So, uh, so love has to have an attitude of service. That's at the very heart of what it's all about.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I I know that you have a book with a colleague of yours, uh, Dr. Paul White, and you talk about appreciation in the workplace. And I think 14 million copies of a book that talks about leading with love, and yet our workplaces do not feel like loving cultures and loving environments. And I really believe that as a leader, through servant leadership, through showing up with love and being able to lead from a position of love, that we have the ability as leaders to affect the love tanks of people in the workplace so that they go home better for those who need them. What's your perspective on that?
I really believe that, Ryan. What motivated us to write that book is so many people in the workplace would say to me, I know you wrote your book for married couples, but I've been applying the concept at work and
Mm,
it's really enhancing my relationships. And someday you need to write a book on how this applies in the workplace. But when I encountered Dr. Paul White, who is a psychologist who's had 20 years experience working with businesses, I really sensed he was the right man with whom I should write this book. So we did a lot of research beforehand. One of the things we discovered is that in our country, 70% of the people who have a job say they feel little to no appreciation coming from the people with whom and for whom they work. That is
mm,
huge.
mm,
64% of the people who leave a job and go to another job say they left primarily because they didn't feel appreciated where they were. So we were highly motivated once we discovered that. So before we ever wrote the book, Dr. White would go into a business and he would share the concept. We call it languages of appreciation in
mm,
the workplace rather than love because the work
mm,
relationship is different from the family relationship,
mm,
but it's the same basic principle. People need to feel valued for who they are, that they're not a
mm,
cog in a machine. And so he would share this concept and let all of them take what we call the MBA inventory, motivating
mm,
by appreciation inventory, and learn everyone's primary appreciation language and secondary, and then the one that's least important to them. And and so everybody had this information. And then he would challenge them to apply it in the workplace. And I think he would send out every 6 weeks a little reminder just to keep it on the
mm,
front burner. And then a year later, he would go back and give a job satisfaction test. He gave a job satisfaction test to begin with. He would go back now and give another one. And in every instance, it was statistically improved. So we
mm,
knew this would help the workplace when we wrote this book. And we've had a great response to it. Where businesses or even segments of a business, just working partners for a small part of a huge business, it really does change the work atmosphere. And
mm.
when people feel appreciated at work, they're more involved in the work process. They're not just doing enough to get by. They're giving
Mm.
their best because they feel appreciated. So it has huge implications for the workplace.
Do you think leaders can fake it? Do you think leaders can fake leading with this sense of love and appreciation?
Well, you know what we discovered, Ryan, that many of the managers that we talked with would say to us, "Oh, I appreciate my people. Oh, I appreciate them. I mean, I tell them all the time how much I appreciate them." And we said, then you're reaching about 40% of your people
Mm,
because about
mm,
40% of them have words of affirmation as their primary appreciation language. But the other 60% probably aren't feeling appreciated. See, the whole idea is that appreciation has to be individualized. You can't just say that I really appreciate what you're doing and expect everybody feels appreciated. if this is your appreciation language as a leader, you probably think that they feel appreciated, because you would if people told you that. Uh, and so the lights kind of come on for a lot of managers and business leaders when they realize that, maybe I'm not being as effective as I thought I was in expressing appreciation to my people. And but just
Mm.
imagine when you get this going in a workplace and people are talking about it. And one of the things we dealt with in that book is that when you start doing this, it's going to seem a little strange. You're going to feel
Mm.
a little odd because you've never done it before. So we just said, admit it. You know, once you know the other person's appreciation language, you just say, this feels a little odd to me because I've never done this before. But I know that your appreciation language is quality time. So I want to begin by just sitting down, if it's all right with you, and let's just have 10 minutes to start with. And you tell me about your family, your history, just as much as you can in 10 minutes. I just want to get to know you. That's the first step in that person really feeling appreciated. And if you go back on a regular basis, whether it's every week or every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, and just have a little quality time with them, talking about things other than business, and later you can talk about business, but then they feel what you're trying to communicate. You care about them. You want to know about them. So yeah.
I love that. And in the book, you touch a little bit around how to lead with love and appreciation remotely. I'm not sure you imagined 2020 and 2021 being the way it was with that in mind. What are some of the practical ways that leaders can lead with love and appreciation throughout the next year?
Well, I think all of us are learning new ways to communicate.
Mm.
The very fact that you and I are doing this would not have crossed our minds a couple of years ago, uh, or probably would not have. So I think we're all learning how to communicate long distance, uh, and sometimes it is technology can be a real help in this. I wrote a book for military folks, for
Mhm.
example, on how do you communicate these love languages when you're deployed. You're
Yeah.
2,000 miles away, and we just went through each one of them and got ideas from military couples who were using it.
Mm.
Uh, so I think the same principle is true in a business. Maybe you don't see the person. Maybe you're working different sites, or you don't see them
Mhm.
nearly as often. I know many of us aren't seeing it as often now because we're working from home rather than working in the office. But I think if we know their language, we can still, whether it's on the phone or whether it's on Zoom or whether it's on some other, technical way of communicating, or if it's gifts, you can send them a gift, for no special reason, not a special day. You're just thinking about you, want you to know I appreciate you. I mean,
Mm.
today I just got a box from a company really that I'd had some relationships with, and they sent me, pears and some candy, and and
Very
even though
nice.
gifts is not my primary language, but man, they were thinking about me. Look at
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Uh, so there are ways of speaking all of these languages if you're not working, face to face with people, and just a little creativity will help you do that.
Hmm. Uh, Inevitably, at work, in churches, in the home, or in our um, neighboring communities, we always come across the unlovely.
Mm,
How do we lead the unlovely?
yeah. But I think first of all we have to ask, why is it that I'm not attracted to that person? Why do they kind of turn me off? Maybe it's personality. Maybe they talk so loud that everybody can hear them. It just irritates you to death. Or maybe they talk so softly that you have to lean in to hear them. It can be personality traits that irritate you. But if they're not getting the job done, the first question is why? Rather than just saying, I'm going to fire them because they're not getting the job done, what are we trying to find out why? I remember one manager said to us, she said, I had an administrative assistant, that just really wasn't hacking it. I mean, she just wasn't getting the job done. And I complained to my husband about it once or twice. And then I told him, I said, I'm just going to fire her. I mean, I can't live with this. And he said, well, honey, before you fire her, why don't you sit down and see what's going on in her life? Maybe there's a reason. And so she did. And she found out that the lady had a teenage son who was on drugs, and she was totally frustrated and didn't know
Mm.
what to do, very depressed and discouraged.
Mm.
And when the manager found that out, she said, well, let me help you find a treatment center. Let me help you here. And she did, and got the teenager help. And within 6 weeks, I mean, their friendship had just gone up levels. And the administrative assistant was involved now, fully involved, because she felt appreciated. Here was a manager who was wanting to jump in the boat with her and help her with whatever she was going through. So we try to find out what's going on and why this person is to us an unlovely person. Sometimes they need more training. We
Mm.
think they know, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes we don't really know their job. I remember a supervisor who said to a manager about an employee under their wing, she said, you need to fire that guy. Every time I see him, he's walking out in the hallway. All he does is walk. And the manager said, well, sir, he's one of our tech people. And he's responding to people who have technical problems with their computers. And he is in the hall a lot, but he's doing his job and doing a really good job. Oh, well, I didn't know that.
That's
So
funny.
information about
Yeah.
what's behind the unloveliness of the person, often can help you be an agent of loving them and helping them deal with whatever the problem is.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's a flip side to love, and that is fear. The good book talks about light and dark, love and fear. And I think fear is a tool that managers have used for a long time to coerce, to control, to get performance out of people. How do we start to bring light to fear and a bit more love to the workplace?
Well, I think when that becomes the primary motivating tool of the manager, it becomes a toxic workplace.
Mm.
And people are doing enough to get by, and they're trying to stay out of the manager's way. And when they are with them, they try to put on a front. But it's a toxic workplace, and they're not happy about going to work every day. They're going because that's the only job they have, and they have to
Mhm.
have funds. But it's a toxic workplace. And sometimes you can sit down and talk with a leader and just kind of give them your perspective on how they come across. And some leaders will be open to hear that, and others will not. Uh, we can't make them have a positive response to constructive criticism.
Mm.
Uh, but the managers who will heed that and begin to listen to what other and ask questions of other employees, how do you feel when for example, last week when I did, how did you feel about that? How did it make you feel? They'll find out that their people are hurting, and their people aren't motivated by that
Mhm.
method of leadership, and they can change. So I say to leaders, be open to what your people are telling you, because they're giving you valuable information. But ultimately, if they don't change, most people will eventually, they'll complain to their fellow employees about it, and then they'll start looking for another job. And then as soon as they find something, they'll leave, because
Mm.
they don't want to spend the rest of their life living in a toxic workplace.
And I think the three questions you asked your wife around how can I help, how can I make your life easier, and how can I be a better husband? If we have more leaders asking those questions of their people, I think we'd see a massive change. A
Yeah, I
massive
think you're
change.
right. I talked with a president of a company. It was a manufacturing company, and he had about 300 employees. He said, Gary, every year I sit down with them in groups of 10, and I say to them, give me your ideas on what would make this a better workplace, or ideas on how we can do things better. He said, some of my best ideas have come out of those sessions.
Mm.
See, many people aren't going to walk up to a president and say, here's what you need to do. But if that president is open and is asking for ideas on how things could be better around here, how could we do things better? How could we make it a better workplace? When people feel safe, they'll share their ideas, and you will get some good ideas.
Mm.
And then as a leader, you've got the benefit of the feedback of the people that are working with you and for you. So being open to feedback from people is a sign of a good leader from my perspective. We don't have to know everything as a leader.
Yeah.
If there are people that are working under our supervision and they know more about whatever it is than we do, we need to learn from them, and then affirm them for what they're doing. You don't have to know everything to be a good leader. You have to be open to learning how best to help people feel appreciated so that they're motivated to invest their skills and their abilities.
You talked about Christ-like leadership and an influence on you in your own life. What are some of the most profound leadership takeaways that you've taken from Jesus?
I think the number one is to have an attitude of service, which we've already talked about. I think another is affirming people's worth. And that's where this appreciation thing comes in. Because all of us want to feel that the people with whom we relate and with whom we work with appreciate us for who we are, that they're not just using us to make a profit or to produce something. Obviously, that's important in business. We have to make a profit to stay in business. But we don't want to feel like we're just being used, and that eventually when we're not being, when they don't need us, they'll just kick us out. But we want that sense that they value us as a person, and Jesus valued everybody. When you look at his life, I mean, he was with the down and outers, and he was with the up and outers. I mean, he related to people of different cultures, and which we know that we're all valuable because we're made in the image of God. At least that's my perspective. And consequently, if we treat people as persons of value and learn how to express that to them so that they genuinely feel that, we're helping them reach their potential in the workplace and in any other relationship.
I know that there's someone listening to this right now that is, had their heart knocked away by the message that I've been putting out for a long time around leading with love. And there'll be something that you've said today that will convince them that this is the approach they need to take. They're a leader. They're in a position of responsibility, a position of influence. They now want to start leading and creating a culture of love. What is the first thing that they should do?
Well, I would say, for me, the first thing I do is pray. God, I need help. I need help. Give me wisdom. Give me understanding that I can be the person I'm designed to be.
Amen.
We have outside help if we want it, I guess is what I'm saying. I think another thing is and many leaders do this, is to read key books on leadership, and especially the kind of emphasis that we're talking about here. I think that's why this 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace has done so well over the last 2 or 3 years it's been out, because leaders are realizing, hey, this can make a real difference, because there's a whole lot of leaders out there that aren't concerned. One construction man said to us, I don't care whether my men feel appreciated or not. I pay them well, they get the job done, that's all I care about. Okay, you're not going to have to work for him very long. Well, with that attitude on the part of a leader, the people they're not going to feel appreciated. Yeah, I mean, they're glad they're getting a good pay, and they'll tough it out until they can find somebody else that will appreciate them more and pay them the same thing. But I think I would say, continue reading and asking other leaders who seem to be, prospering or doing well. What are some key things that you feel are important here? And then listening to podcasts like the one you put out also. I've always felt if you pick up one idea in a podcast or a book, it was worth reading the book or listening to the podcast. So I think if leaders are open, they will begin to pick up on the fact that the attitude of service is the most powerful thing you can do to influence people to reach their potential.
I love that. My final question for you is that my ethos is about helping people be always better than yesterday. I'm just curious to know what the phrase always better than yesterday means to you.
Well, I think we're never too old to learn. And if we have a learning mentality that I want to keep learning, then yes, today will be better than yesterday. If I ever get to the place where I feel like, well, I've attained it, I don't need to learn anything else, I've learned enough, well, tomorrow won't be better than yesterday. You'll actually be living in yesterday. But if we have the attitude, I want to keep learning, I want to keep growing, and I want to keep serving. We're never too old to serve. I was in Thailand and doing a conference, and I met a couple 85 and 84 years old teaching English as a second language. And I said to them, how do you support yourselves? They said, well, we get our Social Security in America, a check, and then I get a little pension from my former business, and it's all we need. And I said, well, how long do you intend to do this? And they smiled and said, as long as we have health. We said, we have no desire to just stop doing anything and go sit in a rocking chair and wait to die, As long as we have life and some measure of health, and even if it's a poor measure of health, as long as you're alive and conscious, you have the ability to impact someone else for good. And I do believe that life's greatest meaning is found in helping others, not in promoting ourselves to a higher level of, whether it's wealth or status or whatever. The most satisfied people in the world are people who give their lives away, helping other people become better people themselves.
I love that. And I think that kind of highlights something that we haven't really touched on, which the love language emphasizes, that love is a choice. It is an intention and a choice. And I just want to say thank you so much for your heart and your time, for spending it with us here at the Always Better Than Yesterday community. We are massively, massively grateful, and just be honored if you'd leave us a final thought from your good self.
Well, I think I would just say, if you haven't discovered or read the love languages or the appreciation languages at work, I would just challenge you to do it and make your own assessment, as to whether this will be helpful to you, and if it's a tool that will enhance your ability to communicate love to people and appreciation to people in a more effective way.
Dr. Gary Chapman, God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Good to be with you.
Thank you for making it to the end of the interview here on YouTube. I hope that our time spent together has left you a little bit better than before you push play. Before you go anywhere, please leave a comment down below, some of your key reflections, your key takeaways. I love hearing from you and what this conversation has inspired in you. Let me know what you're going to do as a result of this conversation. I will be back next Wednesday, where I will share another inspiring guest. To make sure that you don't miss that, please do subscribe, hit the bell, and you will be notified as soon as it goes live. If you're curious to know how I, through Always Better Than Yesterday, can serve you, your team, your organization, please do visit alwaysbetterthanyesterday.com, and it will be my honor and privilege to help you in any way I can. Keep leading, my friends. I've been Ryan Hartley, host of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast here on YouTube. Always love.